Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Now, in just a few minutes, what we'll do is we'll try to unpack some of that somewhat confusing SOPs that was issued for the mandatory work from home directive. We'll speak to a representative from industry as well as one from a workers' union. Now, our team had also reached out to the Ministry of International Trade and Industry as well as the Ministry of Human Resources. However, their representatives declined to come on the show tonight. Now, before we get to that, let's first take a look at an issue that's burning up social media and spawning memes. Plantation Industries and Commodities Minister Khairuddin Amarazali from PAS had incurred public ire for apparently avoiding quarantine after returning from Turkey in July. Now, after 3 months, it was announced today that the police have dropped their probe as the Attorney General's chambers declared that there is no case against the minister. Now, the decision is based on a claim that the minister was not issued a quarantine order. But will that satisfy a public that sees double standards everywhere?
Indeed, Melissa. The question of optics, and one wonders actually today the optics even matter to many of those in authority. When you look at social media, the response has been quite negative. They're looking at this as yet another example of an inability, the lack of political will. Right. To to hold account those in power. So, but what are the facts? And the Attorney General's chambers actually came out with the very logical sequence of events that led to their decision not to charge the minister.
Well, on social media, Sharaad, the hashtag no double standards is is making its rounds, and I think one of the things that they're pointing to on social media is the fact that this case with Khairuddin is juxtaposed against a former contractor who on 2 days ago, contractor Melaka was jailed 14 days and fined 1,000 ringgit. This for failing to self-quarantine, but he left to go to work and to the shops, apparently after coming back from Sabah, where he went to vote in the recent state elections. Now, it was also ruled that if he failed to pay the fine, he would be jailed for another 7 days. This particular news item is being used to juxtapose the Khairuddin story today. Yeah,
in fact, I think for a couple of months now, we've had precisely this leniency showed to some members of the public, perhaps those with connections to those in power, and then a rather kind of hard-nosed attitude towards the general public. If you remember that a rather sad video that went viral of a young boy who was fined, I think, 1,000 ringgit, whilst, not wearing his mask properly. I mean, again, people, and I don't know if people necessarily write about this, but there's a kind of level of distrust in government. Recently, a leading religious figure also talked about the real problems we're going to encounter if people are disenchanted with the political elite. They no longer trust the political elite to be fair, to be consistent and to be clear.
I want to come back to the Khairuddin case, Sharaad, because I think some of the questions that have been raised has been why was it that there is no longer that this case is not going to be taken up by the Attorney General's chambers because in August the Health Ministry had fined Khairuddin 1,000 ringgit. So the question should probably go back to the Ministry of Health and the Director General. Why was Khairuddin not issued the 14B form to undergo quarantine? Why was there no pink band given to the minister? Are civil servants bending rules for ministers? Are they ordered to bend rules for ministers? These are the questions that are being posed at the
indeed,
moment.
I think the Director General was in fact posed that very question this evening. He has responded and he said that as far as he knew, he wasn't aware of the situation. So again, there's a lot of passing the buck. The optics of which, of course, doesn't look good for the government of the day because it seems to underscore at least the sentiment in one segment of the public which feels distrust for those in high in high office. Right. So but Melisa, will this be the end? Will we see the end of this now that the police have dropped this case? I
don't know. I mean, that is really entirely up to, I guess, how the authorities want to take it out, or whether it's going to go down well with public sentiment. But Sharaad, let's very quickly move on to some other news. UMNO President Datuk Sri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi, he today called for a quote, political ceasefire, and said that this ceasefire would, said that UMNO would strengthen its cooperation with Perikatan national parties. Now, this comes, I think, a week after UMNO said it was considering withdrawing its support for Perikatan and had wanted to set new terms for UMNO's continued cooperation with the PN government. So, I guess a change of heart for UMNO.
Well, I mean, there's nothing permanent, I think, in politics, Melisa, and no more than in coalitions. Coalitions are notorious for this constant trading and negotiations. Though, I mean, Barisan Nasional, it must be said, a coalition that lasted for almost 50 years, achieved some sort of stability, perhaps because UMNO was dominant within that coalition. Now you have two major parties or two major contenders within the frame. We have not just UMNO but Bersatu, and you see a lot of the troubles that have beset the coalition have come from the strained relationship between those two components. Of course, PAS is also there in Muafakat Nasional, and I believe that we see the troubles over the elections in Sabah, right, between those two components of this new configuration. We also see trouble in Perak. The state of Perak also looking a bit shaky at times, or even there in Johor. So again, there is a lot of jockeying, perhaps because the partners all look to the same political base or same voter base, right, for their support. Yeah, so again, whether UMNO and Bersatu are actually competitors. And I think it's quite interesting because not too long ago, as you mentioned also a little bit earlier, that UMNO and PAS announced that they're going to register Muafakat Nasional as an official coalition. And what this will do is, although I think this decision doesn't include Bersatu, having UMNO and PAS solidify this coalition, it will mean a strengthening of their party machinery going into GE15 together. I also wonder, this comment about this political ceasefire, I really wonder how long it's going to last, because as you said, nothing is permanent. Yeah, and also at the start of the week, we did have that rumor, or strong rumors of a possible cabinet reshuffle. Reshuffle or an expansion of the cabinet to accommodate the new demands that UMNO had. And so the question is, have those demands ceased? Has Zahid Hamidi, as president of his party, decided to withdraw demands on the Perikatan government led by Bersatu's president, Muhyiddin Yassin? Or just put a pause button on it. Yeah, but of course, politics is not just on the surface, it's also under the surface. We don't know what the kind of behind the doors negotiations are going, but whatever it is, it does seem to have put a pause, a permanent pause perhaps, in the coalition that Anwar Ibrahim was trying to pull together in order to challenge the administration of Perikatan Nasional. And he said he had numbers, with numbers obviously were based on some faction of UMNO supporting him. Has that ended? Looks like it, but who knows? A day is a really long time in politics. It is, you're right. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but after this we'll discuss those new work-from-home measures which have been met with complaints over its lack of clarity. All coming up in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned. You're watching Consider This. I'm Melisa. Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. Now, the newest measures under the CMCO makes work from home compulsory for industries under MITI as well as the civil service. But when it was announced yesterday, there was much less clarity about the directive. And even with the clarification that was issued today, it isn't quite clear how it will be implemented.
if compliance will be monitored, what sanctions will be applied, or even how long this directive is meant for. Now, Consider This reached out to MITI and the Ministry of Human Resources to get clarification on the directive, but they have declined to come on the show tonight. Joining us now, let's hear from Datuk Shamsuddin Bardan. He's the Executive Director of the Malaysian Employers Federation, or MEF. Shamsuddin, now, was there stakeholder engagement with the Employers Federation prior to this directive being issued?
Of course, I would say that there was no such prior consultation. It was purely the decision of the government to impose such condition. But of course, the part is basically that there is a really lack of clarity on how the program is to be really implemented on the ground. And of course, today's announcement by MITI about the so-called SOP is also very confusing, actually.
Bardan, Shamsuddin, have you reached out to MITI for further clarification, or have your members done so?
Of course, some of the members try to actually reach out to MITI, but of course the answer is that they say they're going to come up with the press release or the media release, which they did, today. But of course, again, that also did not really clarify the issues that we are still trying to grapple with.
What exactly is there confusion about? What are you seeking more clarity about specifically?
Yeah, first, of course, is the issue of the people that can come to office and people who cannot come to office. Of course, we understand that this particular directive is imposed on people in the management and supervisory category. Even that also, we are not sure what are really people who are considered within the management and supervisory. Is it all the executive staff, or is it the head of department, or is it what that we are talking about? And of course, that needs to really be clarified. And the 10% of this category, actually, how are we going to reach the 10%? I would say that for the bigger companies, 10% may be able to be fulfilled. But in the event you are just a very small company, say with 5 employees, and they are all the management staff, of course, if you take 10%, for example, nobody can come to office, basically, in that kind of situation. So I would say that rather than to say 10% at every category like that, it's better for the government to say that, okay, look, yes, it is on 10%, but if you are a small company below certain numbers, then maybe you can send 2 or 3 people to office, things like that. Yeah, so that, I think, is something that needs to be further clarified. And of course, the other part is basically when you talk about this particular subject, is why the 4 hours and why the 3 days kind of thing. So that also adds to a lot of confusion as to whether the 4 hours is enough. Basically, of course, we thought that you come all the way to office and you're there for 4 hours, and you go back, and then the next day you go back to office 4 hours. That may not be economically feasible. Yeah.
Shamsuddin, which of your members will find these directives easier to comply with, and for whom would this be close to impossible to comply with?
I would say the bigger companies may be able to fulfill all the requirements, but the smaller companies is basically very difficult to comply with the requirements, especially when talking about the Malaysian employers, where more than 650,000 of them are considered as the micro enterprises. Micro in the sense that they employ 5 and less employees. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the, I think, missing links within the clarification that was issued today by MITI was the fact that there was no end date mentioned in the SOPs. Shamsuddin, how will this impact business planning if you don't know how long this is for?
Of course, I mean, we understand, even though there is no mention about the ending date, but we know that it is associated with the CMCO declaration. So long as there is CMCO being declared for certain areas, then of course this particular directive will still apply. We understand that fully. So that fact, I think there is no major issue with us, even though there is no fixed date stated. Understandable, because this target may be still moving kind of thing. And in the event the CMCO in the current areas are being extended, then of course the same rule would apply.
Well, would that make an impact on business cost operations, or in any way hinder businesses from operating, because you're only complying with these SOPs for about a week or so?
So in that sense, of course, in the event there is no extension of the current CMCO, then of course I think the impact will not be very severe, I would say, because the company can still operate. The only thing is that some of the management staff may not be able to be on site to really supervise the work, thing like that, which of course is very critical for them to be on site. But in the event it is prolonged, say for example like the MCO that we have and the previous CMCO, then of course the effect can be very serious, because we know that during that period the country lost about 42 billion per day when we had the CMCO or MCO the last time. Yeah.
Shamsuddin, do you think that ultimately enterprises are the best place or the best level in which risk assessments are made with regard to COVID-19, rather than these broad directives coming from the federal government? Well, what would you like to see?
Yeah, I would say that when the CMCO was first declared for the District of Klang, for example, we are pretty happy with that kind of, ruling made by the government. And when the CMCO was first initially announced, we are also pretty happy with the ruling, because in that sense we can still operate and of course really up to the company to follow stringently the SOP as being issued by the government. But then suddenly when this so-called ruling to say that certain group of employees in the management and supervisory position cannot come to office and must work from home. The word used is must work from home. There is a directive. Then, of course, that caused a lot of issues, basically.
Well, if you look at both sides of the argument, that on one hand, there are those who agree that businesses would know better who can and cannot work from home, who needs to work from the office and not the government. But on the other hand, Shamsuddin, some would argue that businesses would prioritize cost and profit considerations without a mandatory directive. That's why this directive is important. Do you agree?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that at this moment we are talking about a profit thing like that. Of course, most of the companies now, they are talking about survival, really. And if their survival efforts are being disrupted, then of course I'm worried that many other things may be happening, like further retrenchment, thing like that may be happening, because company of course would like to reduce their cost, thing like that. But this is not to say that they want to make the profit look better. It's just to make sure that they sustain their businesses. Yeah.
And finally, I wanted to ask you whether there is more clarity now in terms of what is the directive when it comes to swab tests. Shamsuddin, what is your understanding as to what the guidelines are?
It is very confusing as far as swab test is concerned. Initially, there was an announcement to say that people from the red zone areas must go through the swab test before they come to work. But then, if you look at all the announcement of the SOP by BT, there was no mention about the swab test. So basically, of course, we in the industries are taking the stand that since there is no mention about swab test, then of course there is no need for the people even from the red zone to do swab test before they come to work in the office. But of course, this clarity by the Minister of Human Resources is, I think, also very welcome, in the sense that in the event the company want to send their employees for swab test, then so will bear the cost. Because previously, so was having this policy to say that you only can do the swab test once. But if it is a second swab test or third swab test, then the company has to bear the cost. But of course, then the clarification by the Minister of Human Resources is very much, I think, shedding some light on this particular subject. But the issue of whether there should be mandatory swab test or not, thing like that, also not very much being clarified by the government.
Yes, well, we're hoping to get more clarification in the coming days or so. Thank you, Shamsuddin, for speaking with us tonight.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more on Consider This, so don't go anywhere. Hi, thanks for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our conversation about the mandatory work from home directive for public and private sector managers. Joining us on the line now, we have Muhammad Effendy Abdul Ghani. He's the acting president of the Malaysian Trades Union Congress, MTUC, which is the Federation of Trade Unions representing Malaysian workers. Effendy, based on what we know so far of the SOP guidelines, what complications do you anticipate from this directive?
From this directive, when we receive, MTC receives a mixed response, only 30% are required to come to office, and for some company, we think might be this policy is not feasible. The other thing is about the swab test, because the guideline doesn't not explain this very clear, because the question now, can the employee go immediately to the office after a swab test, or does she or he have to wait for 3 days, or should the company obviously to do the test again before they go to office? This is a guideline that I think we need to clear the guideline.
Effendy, one of the issues that's arising is whether government should be issuing these directives, blanket directives across industries, or whether it should be left to companies, enterprises to make that kind of risk assessment and to put in place SOPs. Do you feel confident, and speaking from your members' perspective, that companies will do the best they can for their own employees, that they will protect workers' health?
I think for this, can you repeat the question?
Do you think this kind of directive is essential for workers' health and protecting workers' health?
I think these directions, these directions for the business, I think the directions for the business, I think, there's a better position to decide who work from home, because the government has come up with a guideline to reduce the number of people travelling and mix around. It's up to the business entitled to decide which measure should be work from home. In the business world, it can be denied cost and profit opportunity, but at the same time, health is also important. So some companies have been asking their manager to work from home for a long time. The directive became into force. Mandatory directive just makes it easier for the company to warrant their action for the managers work from home. This direction complements what the government and private sector should do to reduce the COVID-19.
Was there any engagement, stakeholder engagement, before this directive was issued? Did you have any engagement? Did the MTUC have any engagement with the government in providing feedback?
No, so far there's no engagement with the MTC. We surprisingly quite surprised, because there's no engagement with the MTC so far.
Would you like to see engagement, and what is it that you would bring to the table, to the discussions or meetings you would have with MITI or any of the other ministries when it comes to the issue of work and the pandemic?
Yeah, of course. I think for the better communications, from our side, MTC think that the government should allocate a worker seat in the National Security Council for the better communications. And also for having the guideline engaged with MTC, we need the dialogue sessions together, because all of us in the same boat when we want to do the best for the country. And at the same time, we don't want to see any company waiting up because of the COVID-19. And also, we also suggest to the government or to PKSO, swab test must be mandatory for the employees from the red zone and the course borne by the SOCSO or PKSO. It should not be optional, because our health matters, and government should give us the confidence that they are really helping us to.
Right. I'm just wondering, Effendy, whether you see this directive, this mandatory work from home, as discriminatory. Because if the intention is to reduce chances of infection in the office, then the message coming up from government is that the health and lives of managers and supervisors are more important than that of other staff. So does it make sense to have managers working from home?
I think this depends. This is direction from the government, so in our view, it's up to the employer to decide if necessary. But the managers can work from home provided their work can be done online. But if the manager are the decision makers, they should be in their office as it's easier for them for the communications, manager and supervisor are required to work from home as per directive of 80, because we think that they are not in the operational process, but in the decision-making process, which can be done from anywhere.
Okay, so you agree that managers should work from home?
From side MTUC, that we see that this is, like I said that before, this is depends on the needs of the company. Okay. If the businesses need the manager to work from home, maybe you can work from home. But like I said, that if the manager are the decision makers, they should be in the operations. Then it's much easier them to come to work for their communication with the workers.
Effendy, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. We really appreciate your time and you coming on the show.
Thank you very much for giving the opportunity for the MTUC.
That's all the time we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching and good night.